I will start with the reading of the appeal statement. Pursuant to the provisions of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, please take notice that decisions of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County Community Oversight Board may be appealed to the Chancery Court of Davidson County for review under a common law writ of cert. Any appeal must be filed within 60 days after entry of a final decision by the board. Any person or other entity considering an appeal should consult with an attorney to ensure that time and procedural requirements are met. We do have quorum, so the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. If anybody wants to move to approve those.
This is Drew Goddard. I would move approval of minutes with the addition with respect to Mr. Engel's comments that were emailed a little bit later. Is that right? Am I not on?
It's on.
Did the thing you sent me, the addendum, was that sent around to the group?
Yes.
Okay, yes, with that addendum, the initial read, to me, looked like it was a little short shrift in the attention paid to Mr. Engel's comments. So that's my motion. The minutes as originally emailed with the addendum emailed after that.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Any focused discussion, any edits on those minutes?
I noticed that on page 2, it refers to Member Hughes in one at the top of page 2.
It's at the second bullet.
It's the second bullet, yeah.
So we're going to have to look and see who seconded that motion. Do we have to?
I amend my motion with the reference to Mr. Hughes to be corrected upon review of the video.
Is there a second for that?
I'm having a hard time hearing it.
We can't hear you because you're not speaking in the mic.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Judge Brown. No more. Is there any more? Are there any more edits to that? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes as amended?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. I'll be quick in the chair remarks here. One thing, I don't know if everyone noted that Dr. Kong had to resign her position on the board. We're really sad about that. She was a great addition to the board, especially bringing her medical expertise, and we really appreciated that while she was here. But she took a job with the Metro Health Department, so she can't serve on this board anymore. But we wish her the best, and I know that we'll be working with her in the future as a Metro employee as well. So with that, we have an opening for second vice chair on the executive committee. And as chair, I have the authority to appoint someone to that position, and I would like to appoint Mr. Hayes, if he would be so willing to serve in that capacity.
I'd be honored to accept.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. And that also reminds me that we need to have a meeting of the nominations committee, and we might need to form a new nominations committee because I think the people that were on the nominations committee the last year aren't on the board anymore. So I would appreciate it if someone could volunteer to chair that committee, and then actually be a few volunteers to be part of that committee as well. I don't know if we have to decide that right now, but I would prefer to get that done sooner rather than later. I think we have elections in January, but we should still start that process now. If no one wants to volunteer quite yet, we can move on. Well, one thing, since we're missing Dr. Hildreth and Mr. Campbell-Gooch, I'm going to defer any action on the hiring and background recommendations response until the next meeting. However, if you have anything you'd like to say about that today, happy to hear it so we can take it into consideration as we discuss it at the next meeting. The reason for that also is because Dr. Villier couldn't join us today. He's on vacation, and it would be better if he could be here to comment on the response, since he wrote the report himself and has a more intimate understanding with the recommendations that we made. Any questions on that? Can everyone hear me? I'm sorry. Mr. Brown, can you hear me? You can hear me okay? No? I need to put this closer. Okay, sorry about that. Now it works. With that, we can go to the next item on the agenda. Councilmember Hall has joined us to talk about license plate readers in his district. Thank you for coming, Mr. Hall.
Let's see here if we can get this. I'm kind of loud anyway, so good evening, everyone. Appreciate your time this afternoon or this evening. As you know, LPRs have been a hot topic for a few years in Metro now, but more recently, several amendments and versions of it have come to light. And I came to speak today just because we had been having so many of those conversations, and as someone on public safety and other committees that have been addressing this in council, but also as someone who has cameras going up in their district. And full disclosure, one of your esteemed members to my right also is a district resident, Mr. Holloway, and so some of this he will have heard many times before. LPRs have taken on a very negative connotation for the most part, but speaking specifically for my district, what the conversation has been centered around. So for those of you who may or may not know, District 1 is the physical largest piece of Davidson County. We're about 92.5 square miles. We literally are almost a quarter of the county, just that one district. So that makes us on average 3 to 8 times larger than all the other council districts. What that does is create a unique scenario for us when it comes to policing in particular, because North Precinct has to answer all of those calls. And so those guys, it is a monumental task to cover that type of distance in a wide open space such as District 1. It has the rural outliers on each end, with Scottsboro and Bells Bend on one side to the west, and then to the north, the Jolton, Whites Creek areas, and Bordeaux in the middle. So what we've had over time in our conversations about LPRs in particular, mainly centered around the fact that we are a wholly baby boomer community, and they are very, very active, but at the same time are engaged in this conversation in a way that may be slightly different than other areas of the city. For the most part, in my 49 years, on this planet and living in that area, I have never, ever been into a community meeting in my district where people ask for less of a police presence. Because of the stretch and the response times, and because of the structure of our district, one of the things that's always come up in the last decade or so were conversations around where we could have cameras. And you started to see some neighborhoods just put up signs saying that this street or this area may be under surveillance, just to act as a deterrent. So the last 2 years, there's been an ongoing conversation, and one of my homeowners associations or neighborhood associations, the Haynes Park group, came up with an idea and did some research, and they helped us narrow down different companies that did the LPRs. The one that was chosen was Flock Security, and some of you guys may be familiar with Flock. But the reason why they chose the Flock model was simply because it gave them the opportunity to have license plate readers in their community, that everyone had the opportunity to opt in or out of the system. By opting in or out of the system, those residents that live in that community identified their vehicles as being people who were residents in that neighborhood, and so those vehicles were not tagged as they came in and out of the community, but the others were. Also, and most importantly, I think for a lot of those folks, was the fact that because of decades of information and some experience, they felt like, for the most part, Flock offered a good product simply because it did not buy into the facial recognition software conversation. So far, what we've explained in our process, because they have gone through the steps, raised the money, put out their first couple of cameras in the Haynes Park subdivision, and are in the process of adding more. They have seen it affect behaviors. They have seen and talked to people who believe it is acting in a positive way, and it's already begun to help some in conversations with law enforcement. One of the advantages of that system that they chose was not just the non-use of facial recognition software because of its unreliability and the confusion that can come from it, not just because of the ability to opt in and out, but the information, the way it's collected and stored, the length of time that is stored, and the fact that no one can utilize that information or access that information without it being logged in, a legitimate reason given for it, all of that stored, and then the data is only stored for about 30 days. But then they have the ability to cooperate, if need be, with law enforcement, and outside of a warrant, they can give permission, but as it stands in the way it's structured, without asking permission, no one can access that information. And so residents who sign on to that or are part of that are bound by that agreement. And so you don't have an issue where information is just shared freely with anyone in any sort. The other advantages that they found with the Flock system so far is that while it tracks license plates or captures license plate, it also stores information about make and model. And so people, I think, are really comforted by the fact that when they are looking at those cameras, they have the opportunity to, just like with an Amber Alert, within a certain number of seconds, if a vehicle's plates that are registered ping in the system, where that may have been a stolen vehicle, it will identify those tags and immediately alert law enforcement, but also it will do make and model to cross-reference. And so it helps when you can rapidly identify if those tags were stolen from another vehicle and placed on another car. And so I think those folks are really happy so far with what they've done. More of my neighborhoods are interested in the process. I have 2 others who are in the process of raising their money and looking at locations specifically where they're going to place their cameras. And during this participatory budgeting process, that $2 million that's been allocated from the administration, several of those North Nashville neighborhoods are looking at being able to utilize some of those funds to go toward their ability to do those. And so I think there's conversation to be had there on the use, on the need, and there's more than enough room, I believe, for some concessions and some clarity, because as I mentioned at the onset, I've got one of those districts, almost wholly baby boomers. I believe our median age now is about 51. They firmly believe in, and this may be just a Southern thing, but I grew up in a community where it's, honestly, those folks' thought process is, I don't mind somebody watching, I'm not doing anything wrong. We know it's not tracking people, we know it's not keeping unnecessary tabs or data on folks, and nothing's going to get flagged with the system that they chose that shouldn't be. And so we're more than open to any conversations or questions. We've been having those Flock individuals come out. Ms. Jill came out last week to a district community meeting that we were having, and that was one of the topics, and those folks were there. And so she was able to hear some of that conversation, the concerns on both sides, and then that group's willingness and the company's willingness to continue to work together to make sure they develop something that everybody could be satisfied with.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Anyone have any questions? Mr. Holloway?
Yes, can you give me any information on any city comparable to Nashville that is using the same process?
For the Flock system itself?
Yeah.
Not offhand. I know there are several that were listed at that meeting. I can get that information, and I'll make sure Ms. Jill has it, and I'll get it to all of the board members. Basically, I can send you their entire presentation, what they're doing, what cities they're doing it in, the only variation that they have on the system, and none of which, again, include the facial recognition software. But I can make sure I get that to you before the end of the day today.
Mr. Hayes.
I'd just like to know, and I guess this was Haynes Manor, you said?
Haynes Park, yes, sir.
What was the percentage of errors, misreads? Do you know anything?
They are operating at a 95% accuracy rate. 95 to 98% accuracy rate is what they listed when they came.
Okay, so 2 to 5% is misreads.
Yes, sir.
And it's an error there. And also, who monitors the system for Haynes Manor? Is it a group or what?
So between the company itself, storing the data for that 30 days, the people in the actual neighborhood, the actual association, are monitoring those. And until there is an MOU or an agreement with Metro that would allow them to work with Metro and share data, if that's what they decided to do, then that's the group that monitors their neighborhood. And anytime there's an incident, that's the group who's responsible for providing Metro with that information.
Okay, but if we did it citywide, it would just be Metro that would, MPD, but that would be monitored.
Well, it would be those individual communities, and then they would have to enter in an agreement with MNPD for MNPD to be able to utilize or access that information. They'd never be able to access it just on their own or without permission.
Director Fitchard. Nope. Mr. Goddard.
Yeah. How long has it been in effect?
So we just got our first 2 cameras up about 2.5 months ago. Everyone's really excited about it. One of the things that going through the process that we were able to really dig into was a lot of the concerns in who was going to have access to the data, how long it was going to be stored, and under what situations, but also the camera placements themselves. So this only tracks or looks at ingress and egress into and out of those neighborhoods. They're positioned specifically so they are only doing that. They're not looking at any direct specific place, or they're not placed in an area where it's in the public right of way. They actually are in residents who said, hey, you can put this pole here at the corner of my lot, and that's how they were placed. This system is a solar system that comes with multiple backup batteries, the ability to store over different times and in different weather conditions, so that in the winter months and shorter months, you don't lose any access or functionality. And the system is basically insured, and so the company replaces any of those parts or anything that breaks.
Mr. Goddard.
Yeah, do I understand that this should be operated by a private company, and it will or they will have processes where they give information to the Metro Police Department without a subpoena or warrant? Or
No,
okay.
Unless the city or MMPD enters into a specific agreement with that neighborhood and that company, then it would require a warrant.
Okay, and
They would have to have a subpoena to access the information.
best you know, do they anticipate entering into that kind of agreement?
No, it's, well, as of right now, no.
Okay.
And it's up to that community. They are the ones in control of their information in their system. And so unless they opt in and choose to do that, then no. It's one of those things that gives a level of flexibility. One neighborhood may want to do it, but the other may not.
Okay.
My residents in Jolton, in that far outlier, are really interested in the process, because in a rural setting where there's a lot of sprawl, and if you guys are familiar with where North Precinct sits, imagine the I-24 exit at the far end of the county, just before the Robertson County-Springfield line, where Jolton ends, having to respond to calls in those areas. It can be a challenge, and the camera system is something that they're looking at and discussing, simply because in those rural settings in particular, people are able to hop off and on the interstate, or you've got a lot of these winding rural roads, and there's a lot of theft in property and things of that nature. And so that's where those, I think, will come into great need in those areas.
Okay, one comment, if you don't mind, you don't need
Sure.
to respond to. Metro Council now is struggling with looking at what rules there should be for Metro Police to operate license readers such as that. I would hope that if that is decided on and gelled and whatever, that we would also look at whether these private companies and what they're doing shouldn't be under some of the same rules on that. But that's just a thought for consideration.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Director Fitchard.
Hi. I know that we've talked about this, but I think it's important that the public knows. I wanted to talk a little bit about the cost of the flock system. I wanted to also wanted you to talk a little bit about how many systems are in the Haynes Park area,
Right.
as well as what happens with the service of that. Is the cost including, the monitoring service?
So there's a separate cost for cameras and monitoring service. Initially, the 2 cameras that they put up, it was $4,000, and that the neighborhood raised for those 2 cameras, and that covered getting the camera set up and then their first year of service, and then they repeat that amount each year for that service. And like I said, once those cameras are up, they provide security and maintenance on those. I don't know, you may have heard the example. What if there's a traffic accident and someone crashes into one of those poles? Yes, they will come out and replace that. It's what if one of the systems goes down or is damaged some type of way through weather or vandalism or something. Yes, they would come back and replace that equipment for those folks. And then again, they account for the months of the year. When they're placing the cameras, they were looking at, because they're solar, where they're going to have full sun, and they judge the batteries according to that, and then adjust for changing in climate and season when you're going to have less of sun so it'll account for those too.
Can you walk me through what it looks like? So if there was a car that came through, how are neighbors alerted that there is, a hit on that vehicle? And then what the process is after that hit takes place? If you know that answer.
Everybody knows how you get that Amber Alert pop on your phone? Just like that. Just like that. The folks in that system, they know when something's taking place. They know when a license plate has been tagged. It's going to only happen in the event that plate has already been tagged or linked to something. So if it's seen in that neighborhood, then that camera would flag that plate as one that was involved in a incident or something else somewhere else, and let both the community know almost immediately that that vehicle was in their neighborhood. And it would be linked to Amber Alert also.
Just to follow up on that, how long would it take then to notify law enforcement?
So they said it pings within 10 seconds, and then law enforcement will know that a camera, not where, has been pinged, and they can see that, okay, one happened in that neighborhood. They're going to reach out immediately and say, hey, this just happened, or this vehicle was just sighted in your area. So the community's on alert for that and paying attention to that. Law enforcement is also. They could respond, they said, within minutes, because it pings within, I believe, 30 seconds, 10 to 30 seconds.
How is the police department getting pinged?
So Flock notifies the community and law enforcement.
And you may not know this, but does MNPD then have to enter into an agreement with Flock?
No. They have the option, Flock, based on, because they're serving that community. So they have to, it's always going to be a three-way conversation. If MNPD wants to enter an agreement with Flock, it wouldn't necessarily include that neighborhood. It may be they're doing it with Flock, and when Flock goes into another neighborhood, they can say, well, we have an agreement with MNPD. Are you guys opting into or out of that? Because the only difference is then they're required to have a warrant when they ask for information or need to see any data.
Mr. Holloway.
Sound like a good device, but I don't know who you talk to, but the people I talk to in District 1, they are majorly concerned with that type of money, $2 million. What could they do with hiring extra police officers and get a quicker response time? Now, that device can send off a signal, but what would happen when the police not available? You know, like I said before, you got a shortage of police officers. We need more police officers. And if we're the largest district in Davidson County, then we need more policing in that area because crime has picked up, has escalated, you know.
From your lips to Guy's ears, you know, that's one of the conversations we always discuss because of our size and sprawl. And yes, I've been pushing for about 4 years now for at least a satellite precinct in Jolton to cover those rural areas because we've had too many incidents where neighboring county, in Cheatham or Robertson, someone has come from there, done something in that area, and then jumped right back on the interstate or hit one of those back roads and been gone. A couple of those that may stand out, you guys, just within the last 2 years, where we've had a couple of service stations that were robbed. And one in particular, right there at I-24 in Jolton, it did not bode well because the attendant at the station ended up wounding both of those gentlemen that attempted to rob that place. And so if we can find a way to have a system that works for those communities and can serve as a stopgap until the administration sees fit to provide us with that other precinct, then I think that's where we're headed for the moment, but you're absolutely correct.
Having a precinct really doesn't solve the problem. To having a precinct, you got to have manpower. You know, they put other precincts in other parts of the city, but when you're still dealing with the same number of police officers, you're talking just a little over 1,300 officers, and you're trying to police Davis County with the same number of officers you did when I retired by 8 years ago, and you can't do that. This city is growing probably 100 people per month or more. So putting a precinct is great, but you got to have the manpower. You know, you just can't be pulling over here and not replacing people. You've got to increase your number of officers.
Well, and I think to that point specifically, it's why you start the conversation around a precinct, because you know it has to be staffed. And so that gives us an accurate account of what we need to ask for from a budgeting standpoint in order to fill that precinct. We just passed legislation to provide a new precinct for Antioch a few months back. And so it's going to take time for that to come online because you have to be able to staff it. But they're experiencing some of those same scenarios too, because the way Antioch is situated, they're directly impacted by Franklin, Smyrna, Laverne, and Murfreesboro. And so you have incidents that take place there that may or may not be their residents. And so they're feeling some of the same things that we're talking about right now that our district is feeling. And so, again, we're looking at stopgap methods, something until the city sees fit to provide us with that. And that's a whole separate funding issue that, you know, we can get into.
But, excuse me, you saying until the city sees fit. The city may not see fit, but it's what the community see fit, what are affecting them.
Well, I can say this. We have a direct impact on the participatory budgeting conversation, but even that in itself, if we're going to be completely honest, it's a little insulting. We're talking about $2 million divided between 5 districts in North Nashville and Bordeaux. And I give the example of how I started over. So my oldest is 26 and my youngest is 1.5. If I feed my 1-year-old and my 26-year-old the same thing, one of them's going to starve. You cannot take District 1, which is 3 to 8 times bigger than the rest of the council districts, and think it's adequate to fund us the same way as you would another area in the city. So that's why I say when the city sees fit. As a community and district, we have to continue to put pressure on, but that's us getting 27 other people in or 26 other people in the room to say, absolutely, this funding should go to this area for this thing.
Mr. Witzel and then Mr. Hayes.
I'm curious to know, when the community members get the alert, what information are they given? And more specifically, are they told the nature of the crime that the license plate was involved in?
No, it's the make and model of the vehicle, the license plate, the make, model, and color. And that's, again, so that you can cross-reference and have the ability to, and part of what makes it more reliable than somebody trying to use some facial recognition. I guarantee you, and not to throw anybody off, if somebody let out a description of a crime and they described a 6-foot black male, you and I both would get pulled into the lineup. With something like this, here is, if they say a red Chevy and you have a partial plate and it tags that, it'll separate the type of vehicle, whether it's a Chevy Impala versus a Toyota Corolla, but just both red. That's how, when you put the wrong tag on a different vehicle, it'll tag that license plate, but it'll still record the type of vehicle that plate was on, so that you'll know if somebody stole the tag, because it allows them to identify the tag and let you know if your tag was stolen off of your vehicle and used in a crime somewhere else.
Thank you.
We've been in this process for quite a while, and I've seen the legislation with, Council Lady Stiles, I guess Rosenberg and Johnston, and I'm kind of confused. Are you introducing new legislation, or what's different from what you're proposing? Or are you piggybacking on one of the existing?
It's not about introducing new legislation. There may be an amendment coming, but what I've done is try to operate outside of a vacuum. What happened over the last few years in council is a lot of conversation. Honestly, people involved who are never impacted by something like this, talking about how they believe something will impact another group. And what they've been able to do just these last couple of months with my district is have a very involved, active community who's gone through the process of educating themselves, getting involved, attended those council meetings, attended public safety meetings, attended meetings with that company, and met with those other council members and said, hey, you guys are talking about this, it affects us, but nobody's actually talked to us to see what specifically we want, how we believe it will impact us, and then see where we can come to an agreement or come to terms. Because a lot of the legislation, again, was proposed in a bubble before they actually got on the ground and talked to individuals who will be dealing with or impacted by it. And that requires some reverse engineering.
But I'm still confused, though. What are your next steps? That's what I'm saying.
So specifically for our communities?
Yes.
So the areas of my district that like the LPR cameras, like the systems like the Flock, are moving forward with installing those in their neighborhoods themselves. They're working with myself and other council members to let them know in real time, this is how this data works, this is how this is impacting us, here's what you may or may not want to consider, and here's what you need to look at in terms of how you decide to move forward, especially if you're entering into an agreement with law enforcement. And that way you have firsthand information, not just data that's brought to you by law enforcement and presented, but from the actual communities who are requesting these or have these.
Okay, so funding, so each one of these organizations, they have funding, or this is something that the company is just doing?
No, these are neighbors who did their homework and are funding themselves.
Okay.
Wow. You know how we do. Wow. We go to work. We will, whatever type of fundraiser or drive we need to do, we will do. Because the city set some of these great examples in terms of, and I say that tongue in cheek, with in lieu, like with sidewalk funds and different mechanisms that we use to pay for things in the city, it came back to developers. So what you're seeing in a lot of these neighborhoods specifically is if a developer is saying, I'd like to build something in your neighborhood, they're saying, well, we don't want you to do something at this playground. We may want you to put this camera here and this camera here. So they're getting creative in how they.
So Metro is using this group and highlighting them as a pilot, and they're not receiving any funds? Well,
no, not Metro. The community is saying, this is what we're doing. Right. Metro, look at us like a pilot.
Yes.
Don't guess, because when you do legislation, guesswork should not be part of the process.
Yeah.
Look at us, look at how we're going about this. It may be different for a different neighborhood, so you're going to have to talk to different neighborhoods, interact with them as they do this. So slow down, don't rush, don't guess. Base your legislation on real data from real neighborhoods who are going through the process.
Yeah, but I'm just saying a legislation that was introduced that people came and they talked about, they
Right.
highlighted Bellmead and they highlighted, I guess, Haynes Park there. But that's just interesting. I mean, when you talk about
Yeah.
District 1 not getting funding for different things, I just thought that was interesting. Okay.
Well, yeah, hopefully that'll happen. And like I said, it got brought into the participatory budgeting conversation because there's a specific dollar amount that you have to spend on each item in that process. And so the more people that request them, if you guys aren't familiar with that participatory budgeting situation, they'll collect all the data, then they'll actually have an election. The people will vote online for those things that are on that list, and if that's something that goes, then it'll be able to be funded through that process.
Thank you.
I just have one follow-up question.
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me. You said that you guys have one in Haynes Park. Is it operative? Is it operating now?
There are two
There's
in Haynes
two.
Park.
Okay.
The entrance and the exit, both at the West Hamilton entrance to the Haynes Park subdivision at Haynes Park Drive in West Hamilton, and then the Kings Lane Haynes Park Drive entrance to the subdivision.
And they're operative now?
Yes, they are up and operating.
Okay.
Ms. McCree and then Mr. Witzel.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Earlier in your remarks, you mentioned some of the rural areas in District 1. And so in areas like Jolton, what are you all doing right now since you don't have the manpower, you don't have a precinct, public safety-wise, to kind of fill those gaps? Are there any local programs, initiatives that are happening to make sure that area is maintained and safe?
Actually, no. It's a struggle. These are community groups that are looking for different alternatives. We are a district that is full of neighborhood watch and neighborhood associations and HOAs, and it's people coming together, being boots on the ground. But outside of that, there's no specific program or funding that's gone anywhere in that district for those types of things. What a lot of them have done is restructure themselves just from a neighborhood watch or normal HOA to also creating a nonprofit component so that they can get grant funding to fund these types of activities.
As a follow-up, outside of the entrance in the precinct, is there any other, I know there's nothing active right now, but is there any other kind of like motto or thing that you're hoping for that could fill that gap?
There are some basic things that we're just looking at from the onset, from a city standpoint, in terms of infrastructure that would include lighting and the way we have created some of these entrances and exits, focusing on the conduits into certain neighborhoods and communities, because we're very limited in line of sight because of District 1 also has 65% of all the urban canopy left, meaning all the green space. And so when you're thinking about these residential neighborhoods, those are components that you have to factor in. If you're in a community that averages an acre per lot, and that's in urban services, when you get into general services, now you're into a whole different genre. And so you have to start to get creative in how you approach those things. And I can tell you just real quickly, one of the weird things that led into this conversation, even before the LPR conversation came up, you know what folks were doing in my district, both in urban and rural setting? Bass Pro Shop. Come from a long line of hunters and fishers and things of that nature. You guys familiar with those deer cams? They have night vision. They're motion activated. They run about $100, and people would put them in their yards, and it would catch an image of something moving. It was ring before ring, but in real time, and they came with little memory cards and things of that nature. Some of the more expensive ones you can use hooked to Wi-Fi, but people were already utilizing things of that nature and trying to be creative to solve some of the problems that we were facing.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
You talked about Haynes Park and the members of that community
Yes, sir.
deciding that they wanted that was something that they wanted to do. What's the formal process of them like making that sort of decision and moving forward with it? Is there kind of a formal process, or is it just kind of those who show up to community meetings and decide? And do they engage other people who are not maybe as involved?
So the neighborhood association went door to door for 250 homes. They knocked every door and got a signature from every resident. Yes, I want to be in, or yes, I want to be out. And even some of the ones that opted out still donated to have them put in. But they literally went door to door, provided the information packets from the company, had a series of meetings and brought people out over the course of the year to be involved in those conversations, and then entered into the process with the company itself. And then they still have their monthly meetings where everybody comes to that neighborhood meeting and they can get caught up if they're behind or get information. Everyone gets a little booklet and packet of how the process works, how the information works, and then they get an annual fundraising report so that they can see this is what we've raised, or this is how much we still owe for the ones we currently have for service. Let's fill in those gaps. And so they've got it well put together. I commend them because they put in a lot of work over the last year and a half.
Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up to that. Can you talk more about this opt-in and opt-out process? That seems, I mean, if Metro has their cameras, we won't be able to opt out. There's no option to do that.
Well, that's if Metro does it, but that's why individual neighborhoods are doing it, taking it upon themselves, and then choosing whether they want to partner with Metro or not.
But if we pass legislation that allows Metro to do it, then, what's the point of passing legislation if neighborhoods are going to do it themselves?
Well, that's why the council is supposed to listen to those neighborhoods. That's why I made the statement before about putting the cart before the horse, because a lot of this legislation conversation took place in theory. They were looking at what happened in other cities or what they thought may or may not happen, but I don't know many folks who had actually gone into these neighborhoods and physically had these conversations with folks in the community and said, what do you want? How do you see this playing out? What are your concerns? And taking upon themselves to go about it the way we've gone about it. Because Metro didn't come to us, we went to them to have this conversation as far as from a community standpoint. That company didn't just show up out of nowhere. They went through a list of companies and did their research, and they interviewed people and brought in the groups that they narrowed down and then chose this one. And so I think, again, to Mr. Hayes' point, I think what that community is saying is look at us like a pilot. Before you get too far down the road, look at us and see if it works and what you would change or not change. Because people in that subdivision are happy with the idea of being able to say, I don't mind you recognizing my vehicle as it comes in or out, or everybody that lives in that neighborhood, when they sign up, it's, here are the vehicles at my house. So it doesn't flag those vehicles coming in and out of the neighborhood automatically. Only the things that are foreign to or that aren't residents of that neighborhood are what's going to show up outside of something that has, been involved in an actual incident. The cameras just won't pay attention to your vehicle because it knows you live on your street. It won't pay attention to your wife's vehicle because it knows it's at the same resident. But if you have a different vehicle come in and that vehicle's been involved in something, then it'll ping that vehicle.
Do you know how many of your residents have opted out?
For that neighborhood group, I believe there were only about 10. It was 10 or 11 that didn't want to be part of it. And I can tell you there was a specific thing to that, right? One of the things that you have, especially in boomer communities, is my phone will ring, but they won't call Metro. They'll call me and say, I saw, but I don't want to make an official report or I don't want to tell something. And so you still have some of that mindset. Mm-hmm. And so you'll have people that say, I don't want people to know I have access to this. Or you had somebody say initially, I'll sign up and be part of it, but I don't want the camera at this point because I don't want people to think it's in my yard or at my house, that kind of thing.
Mr. Hayes.
Okay, you were mentioning, and this is my last question, the 10 that you said that opted out. Okay, they have vehicles. And so you're saying their vehicle is not put in the system, that their vehicle is not one of the vehicles that's going to be flagged, but are they in a pool with, say, all of Nashville that can come in and in the neighborhood? Are they in that group? Would they be put in that group?
So if one of those vehicles was reported involved in something somewhere else, when they come back into their own neighborhood, it will ping.
So okay, but what about the residents?
Well, that's what I mean. If you're a resident and you didn't want to participate, if your vehicle's involved in an incident somewhere else and that plate is in the system, then when you come back into your neighborhood, basically your neighborhood is going to say, what'd you just do somewhere else?
Okay, but if you're in the system, into the same thing, if I decided to be a part of the system, I go out and I do something.
No, oddly enough, you would get pinged in somebody else's neighborhood, but not your own, because you in your neighborhood told the system, I live here, it's okay to ignore my car coming in and out.
Okay, and I guess
does that make sense?
I guess I'm viewing that you're using this if somebody's in, they committed some type of crime or something, and then all of a sudden they come back to the neighborhood. That's what I'm saying. No,
right. That's what I said. If you commit a crime somewhere else and you're not in the system and you're not told, or that camera's not told to recognize your vehicle as a resident and to just ignore you, if you are involved in something somewhere else and you come back to the neighborhood, then that camera will ping you, as opposed to it ignoring you because you said, I live in this neighborhood and it's okay, just ignore me as I come in and out.
All right, interesting.
Director Fitchard.
They were, I think, and for clarity, I think they were looking for flexibility in a system that says, if I have a son-in-law or a nephew or someone who may have a record that did something once upon a time, how do I account for them coming to visit me? They've not done anything else, but we want to make sure they're not being tracked or followed from one place to the other or being surveilled in any type of way. And so having that flexibility and that option, I think it comes into play in that mindset.
So if I heard you correctly, what you said was that if I live in a neighborhood, I can opt out. I can put my license number to flock, and they wouldn't, when I come in and out, they would not track me,
right,
for lack of a better word.
Right.
Would I be able to do that for my mother or my?
You can list the vehicles that are going to be at your house on a regular basis. And that's, again, them coming up with ways and finding a company that'll work with them and give some flexibility, because, my older kids don't live, but they come to visit. Or if I've got one that's away in college, it may show up at 2 o'clock in the morning coming home from out of town and I'm not there. Yeah, my ring will show, but that camera will also know that that's a vehicle that's okay to be coming into that subdivision and pulling up to my house.
And then my other question is, since you already have 2 cameras, can you tell us any information? Have you had success in this? Has Metro had to respond to anything over there? I mean, do you have any?
According to the neighborhood association, they have had some successes, that they had a few vehicles that were involved in incidences other places, including one officer-involved shooting from some time ago, that a car that was involved in that was pinged coming in the neighborhood, and Metro was able to identify and make an arrest, I believe, in that situation.
Thank you, Director Fitchard. I have a few more questions. Do you know who the neighborhood association decided has access to the data?
Yes, they have a list of people in that community who have access to it. You actually, if you're a part of that process, you have an access code that you're able to go in at any given moment and look at data in your neighborhood. And,
who's going to oversee that process? I know that if I went in and accessed the data inappropriately or access the data at all, that my footprint would be on it. But, you would have to determine that, some harassment happened because I was able to use the database, not because I used the database illegally. if that makes sense.
Right. And I kind of use that as an example when I was asking questions of the neighborhood association, because I think I used the phrase, I don't want you guys to create a scenario where someone's being bullied, harassed, or you're out here trying to organize a posse to go find someone or track someone down. And I think what came out of those questions in that conversation was simply, when that data is only stored for up to 30 days, everybody has to, if you go into that system and you look at the camera footage in your neighborhood, you have to give a legitimate reason for why you're doing it. It's time stamped. When you go in, the length of time you're in, how many times you go in, it tracks that for everybody because you're associated with that login, and then it's gone after 30 days. But during that time period, anytime you go into there, every action, it's almost like a keystroke program that you would have, but it tracks every movement that everybody does that goes in and access that system. And so if I were to, in that neighborhood, and I were to go in, my neighbors would know if I was misusing it or attempting to misuse it, because I'd have to justify every action while there.
Do they get notified every time someone logs in?
There's a log so that you can go in and see everybody else that's logged in and when, and that reasoning for them logging in.
Do you know what the reasons are? I mean, and who can verify?
I couldn't tell you right offhand their list, but that'll be included in the packet of information from Flock, what's normally in the system, and I think if there's any that were added by the community itself.
And while we're on Flock, I was just on their website and trying to get educated, and I know that they're a company and they're trying to sell things, but one of the first things I see is a link to a story that says 60% crime reduction in Cobb County, Georgia, over the course of a year after they installed cameras. And I'm not a statistician, but I know that correlation is very different than causation. And
right.
For them to just claim that they were able to reduce 60% of crime in a county seems deceptive at best.
So I can tell you the question that I asked in response to seeing that myself was, are you able to say it was a direct correlation in deterring crime or preventing crime in some specific way? Because the example I gave in my opening statement of, we've seen stores and neighborhoods put signs up to say they were under surveillance when they really weren't. And you see a change in behavior of people because when folks recognize that, they deviate from or avoid those spaces and places. I equate it to gun safety or gun laws. When you see mass shootings happening, where do they happen? They happen in gun-free zones primarily, places where people are not supposed to have guns or aren't expected to have one. Churches, schools, movie theaters, concerts, things of that nature, areas where it's either forbidden or just, taboo. And so individuals target those areas because they know they're not going to get an immediate response. The same thing is happening with these. When people know an area is casting a net over it, they tend to work around or move around that. And when you're dealing with a lot of the senior communities, because they're creatures of habit, because they operate the same way often, it's really easy to learn some neighborhoods' patterns. When people are out and about walking, when people are coming and going from work, that type of thing, and they get their routines down. And so you will hear from both insurance companies and law enforcement alike, them warning seniors against certain things like that or making them be conscious of things like that. This is one of those things that comes in and seems as a deterrent, because one of the issues that they were having was hand-to-hand drug exchanges, where people know it's a senior community. A lot of folks not going to be out and about, especially certain times of day or night, and two cars would just pull up, do their business, and then take off, right? Well, you see an immediate impact when somebody realizes this is a neighborhood I've been coming in and out of and doing that, and now I see cameras up. I'm going to find another spot to do that. So that's that causality that's hard to track, but is very apparent to folks in the neighborhoods.
Mr. Holloway.
Criminals look at it this way. After 35 years, from my experience, they notice when the shortage of manpower, when police is tied up, they know they can do their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have to worry about a quick response from the police. Just go ahead and do their robbery and go ahead on. For putting up these signs talking about their safety net, they find a way to get around that. They do their observation, they study.
Mm-hmm.
So we definitely, manpower is a key thing.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Holloway. I guess just one more comment on what you had just said. It seems like the effect is more like that fake owl that they put on top of the grocery store to scare the birds.
Mm-hmm.
So, why do we have to collect people's data in order to prevent crime like that?
I would say it's not about collecting data because the time period is so short and it's only noticeable under certain circumstances. If the vehicle's not already been involved in something, then it just passes through the system. If an incident happens and those cameras are pinged, that means that vehicle has just entered or left that neighborhood, meaning outside of in that moment, there's no reason to hold on to or do anything with that data beyond identifying that vehicle and notifying law enforcement if necessary. But it's not like next month, if I come into that same neighborhood, the data from last month of me being there is still there, and that just doesn't exist. I think that's why they chose that system, and no system's perfect. But again, it took these folks about 1.5 years to find somebody they were comfortable with and a system that would meet their needs, but also gave some flexibility. Now it's just about, do we as a city want to go down that road and try to create, which we too often do, a cookie cutter version of something for everybody and apply it to everybody? I'm not a particular fan of that. And being a true Southerner and, again, someone raised in this city and in that community, my mindset's a little different when it comes to the idea of being surveilled, as are most of my residents. You see in that age bracket, if you interview those folks and talk to them, you'll get a pretty quick idea of where they stand in terms of their view on being surveilled or data being collected. They are concerned. Nobody wants to be surveilled or over-policed, but if you're going to put it to a person, what you'll hear in the next zip code from that will be very different from that zip code, which is why I don't like the cookie cutter approach. Because, again, I have never been involved in any community meeting or activity in my area where people wanted less of a police presence or shorter response time. If they could come out of their house, pull out of their driveway, and look to either corner and see a patrol car passing by, they'd feel better. But for them, it's the polar opposite because we are so massive and the response time is so bad due to manpower. It's a huge problem. I mean, literally people are going online doing police reports in some parts of my district because it may be hours, it may be a day, it may be a couple of days in response time for something that's non-emergency. And that's just unacceptable. People should not feel like they're forgotten, cast aside, or more or less just not important. And this is all about public safety and quality of life for them.
Mr. Nguyen, did you have a question?
Thank you, Councilman, for your presentation. You may have answered the question already. You've given us the benefits of the program, but in your constituents, when you've talked to them, what have they said about what they sacrifice in civil liberties with a program like this? You touched on it, but I'm just curious about the ones who don't want to opt in.
Well, and again, it's going to vary from place to place in groups that you talk to. District 1 being the dynamic or demographic that it is, for us from almost one end to the other, that's not, as high a concern as you would believe, because they're looking at the pros and cons either way, and you're talking to a different generational mindset and approach that says, we firmly believe that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we want to highlight anything or anyone that's not. And so we don't have a problem with someone watching, but we're not going to allow you to just do it under any circumstance with no oversight or any repercussions to abuse of it. But they absolutely have weighed out, you know, are you okay with somebody, at least for the next 30 days, keeping tabs on? And what you'll get from my communities, from one end to the other, is every neighborhood still has a Miss Johnson. That lady that doesn't work, that's home all day, that can tell you every vehicle that comes on your street, when you had guests at your house, and sometimes too much information on how long they stayed or that kind of thing. And they look at it from that standpoint. It's, if I don't have access to police presence, if I don't have adequate response time, what can we do in the interim until we have that to feel safer in our homes?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Director Fitchard and then Ms. McCree.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing, just to put this in the record. I've been following the LPR conversation across the nation. It's a hot topic. And as I've listened in to conversations of experts across the country, there's been some issues regarding the length of time that the data is kept. And so 30 days has been an area of contention. I think the ACLU has said that they had some concerns about that as well. And so I know that this is something new in your neighborhood. Is 30 days the number that the flock system came up with, or how did you come up with that 30-day retention rate?
What those neighbors have looked at is they were trying to find a comfortable space between 10 and 30 days. They thought 10 should be maybe the minimum, but no more than 30. And so that's the community trying to work that out and see what they're most comfortable with, because again, it's something new. It's still basically like a pilot program, and they want to see how it works. But I think having, again, the key word, that flexibility to make those adjustments is everything for them.
I guess I have a follow-up question. So if a neighborhood comes up with 30 days, and then legislation comes out, and they're putting LPRs in this city, and it's retention for 3 days, how does that work? How do you mesh those two differences?
You heard Belle Meade mentioned in the conversation early on, because Belle Meade is grandfathered in. If your neighborhood puts cameras in today before the legislation won't impact that neighborhood. They're grandfathered, or should be. This gives us a little checks and balances on ourselves, I think, being able to do that, so that Metro can't exceed or extend itself.
Going back to some comments that you made and referring to comments that Mr. Holloway made, you mentioned earlier that before these cameras, there were incidents in which residents of yours felt that they were forgotten, that they were unheard. And Mr. Holloway made a good point that without the manpower, how do these things work? And just for public record, I really want to understand your perspective of, you have the data, and these license plates readers will ping if there's a car that has been involved in an incident. But if you don't have the manpower to follow up on the incidents, on these pings, how does this work and why is it important?
Efficiency. When you have less manpower, you need to operate in a more efficient manner. And instead of them chasing unnecessary leads, now you have something viable to go on. They're not just pulling over random cars or cars that they're doing a lot of guesswork on. It narrows down that conversation, I believe, for law enforcement to say, okay, I have a make, I have a model, I have a full or partial plate, as opposed to I had someone call and say, this type of vehicle, and I think the plate was, and then they're randomly trying to either pull over a bunch of cars or not pulling over any cars. And to that manpower standpoint, we had a period of time where North Precinct would tell you they had promoted all of their traffic officers to detective to solve other crimes. And so nobody was even doing traffic enforcement. And you've got that in multiple areas in the city, trying to maximize efficiency and utilize the manpower that they have as best they can.
Thank you.
I have just one more question, I promise. Who decides who to share the data with? So if a law enforcement agency comes to the neighborhood association and asks for the data, is there a vote? If I have access, could I just give it to them myself?
No, it would go before the body to get that information, and law enforcement outside of an agreement with that neighborhood is still going to have to go get a warrant.
But if I...
Meaning you're a person in that neighborhood, if you know law enforcement wants access to that and they came to you, you couldn't singularly outside of the group just volunteer that information or access to that information to them.
But I could access it, giving a legitimate reason, and
Yes.
then give it to law enforcement.
No, you can't share it. You can look at it, but you can't share it with anybody. That's part of you signing up to be part of that system in that neighborhood. Is to prevent individuals from doing that very thing, signing up just to be part of it, and then sharing information with outside entities as they see fit. That's why it's structured the way it is, to prevent that.
How is that enforced?
There's liability because you are entering into agreement as a collective. So you will be held accountable. You are held liable for that information if you do something.
By who? Yeah.
I mean, legally, you're bound by that agreement to your neighbors.
But I, as a neighborhood association, would have to sue that person then, which costs money.
I mean, they're having to pay for the cameras themselves. They're having to pay for everything themselves. The city's not providing anything. They're already in the situation of having to pay for everything as is. We're having to enforce things ourselves as is, and that's the unfortunate scenario that we're in. If you look at, and I've made this statement a bunch of times in the past about at some point the budget has to reflect the priorities of the people. We're not being efficient in our budgeting and in our spending because some of these things shouldn't be an issue. If we spent our money properly, this is just me, we wouldn't have to have the LPR conversation.
Mr. Goddard.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate if somebody's contractually bound, they should do that. But I also hear what Ms. Martinez is saying, that unless there's someone there who has the legal authority and likelihood of enforcing that contract, that may not be much deterrent. If a police officer is a member of the community and signs up and is given access, that creates a slew bit of problems. And if a police officer calls a friend that is, I appreciate that friend shouldn't go in and look if he has access and tell the police officer. I also appreciate it might happen. And I'm not suggesting we know all the answers, but I am suggesting that's a question maybe we need to look at as we go through here.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why, again, you heard the phrase pilot, you heard the phrase process,
Right.
because the scenario you're describing now applies across the board in this city, all levels of government. I'm not supposed to share information with people about certain things because I can access certain information. I can't account for the other 39 members who may have a friend in law enforcement or may have a friend in development or this, that, or the other. So, I mean, I get that it's a concern, but that's a concern that literally applies to every part of Metro government. And so I think you do the best you can and allow communities to create solutions for themselves. They work for themselves, as long as they're not infringing upon anyone else, and that Metro respect that, and Metro itself, whether they want to or not, understand that you can't use a blanket item for every situation. Hence conversations around community policing and investing in neighborhoods, to my point about you don't need cameras or you don't need more law enforcement in certain areas, because I know in the neighborhoods where you are investing heavily in education, in job creation, right, economic development, things of that nature, look at your crime data, right? So you don't need those same resources. That's on us. That's on the body. That's on the city to make sure those resources are going into these areas to lessen the need or even need for conversation around these things.
Any other questions? So just, I guess to wrap it up, you don't know what the next step is going forward in council. Are you co-sponsoring that legislation at all, or?
I'm not. I'm focusing on what my community members are doing, making sure they're staying engaged with the body as a whole, and then making sure that I relate to those other members. This is what's happening in real time. Have a conversation with these folks. Have a conversation with yours before you go into that rabbit hole and say, I think this should be this way. And let me end with this. And it's something that is always going to be an elephant in the room anyway. But as I explained to some of my colleagues, this is a conversation, like many, heavily weighted toward minority communities. That is a reality. So if you're not engaging them and talking to them, you're wrong for talking about what's going to impact them or what you believe is going to impact them. And that goes across the board when you're talking about Metro itself or you're talking about peer cities and best practices. You have to engage those folks directly because you can't talk about what's going to impact somebody else in the bubble. And I've had to interrupt meetings or conversations where I said, hey, you do understand across demographics, guess who's targeted the most? Guess who's surveilled the most? Guess who's going to be in a scenario that's most affected by this? So you should probably talk to those people or people like me before being so adamant about, what your stance is and in the process. I think that has helped in slowing the conversation. Again, there's no rush. We've been having this conversation for a few years now. And I think that is the most important key to this, that you guys, that council, that law enforcement realize it's not something that's going to happen overnight, that should not happen overnight, and you have to interact with the people first across the board so that you're going to get the best result. This isn't something that's absolutely necessary. So if it's a want or something you're trying to add, take your time, let these communities tell you what's going to impact or work for them as opposed to it being told to them. I saw her sign turn.
Yes. I just wanted a brief demographic breakdown of your district.
My district, racially, age-wise, we're about 51 median age across the board. And racially, we're one of the few districts in the city, maybe the only one that's almost dead even, almost 50-50 black and white.
Perfect. And do you have a median income?
By area or overall?
Overall.
So overall, you're probably looking at 49 to 54,000. And that's a two-person household.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Councilmember Hall,
guys.
for joining us.
Please stay involved, keep working, and whatever I can do, or if you want to participate in our community meetings, we'd love it. She knows she can always come back.
Thank you very much. So we got about 45 minutes to get through the rest of the agenda here. I'll pass it to Director Fitchard for the Executive Director's report.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly so that if there's any questions, you can ask me at the end. I want to thank Attorney Laura Fox from Metro Legal for sitting in for us today. It was appreciative because Mr. Dickerson, who usually is here, is out on paternity leave.
Director Fitchard, could you speak into the microphone a little bit more?
Oh, sorry. So the office opened up for regular business on July 1st, and its safety measures are in place, and it's been going really well. We're getting adjusted to being back in the office full time, but everything's going well. We have a personnel update. We hired an investigator, Amy Simmons, and she started on July the 6th. and she's fitting in really well and learning some processes. Attorney Daniel Yoon was selected as the COB legal advisor, and Gavin Crowell-Williamson is our new research analyst, and they will start mid-August. So we also have, at this point, we have one position open. That is a community liaison, and I just got an update on that there's over 45 applicants for that job. I'm really excited about that. The function of our community liaison is a vital part of what we do, and having the right person in that position who's going to be a community connector is really important, and I'm excited about that. I'm glad that there's a lot of interest in it. I was a little concerned, and so I'm happy now. So moving on to training, I took a training, a webinar that was put on by the Vanderbilt's radiology department. It was an inaugural diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was their week to celebrate that. And so the particular course that I took was Becoming a Racial Equity Learner, Advocate, and Broker, Informing a Racially Inclusive Sociological Imagination. It was really interesting. It was put on by Dr. Rayshawn Ray, and it was well received. Assistant Director Clausey was the guest speaker for the Nashville Conflict Resolution Center's virtual Lunch and Learn, and he presented on the COB's role in mediation and police accountability, and we'll talk a little bit more about mediation. And then this year, we're having our 27th annual NACO conference. The virtual component will include 32 individual webinars. This component of the conference will take place August the 16th through October the 7th, and if you are interested in that, you should let us know so that we can get you signed up for that. And then there's going to be an in-person component that will be 4 days of training in Tucson, Arizona, and that is in December. That's the 12th through the 16th. So, I know that we won't be able to host every board member for the in-person. You are welcome to go to that on your own. But if you are interested in the virtual, let me know so that we can get you registered. And for those who haven't had their training through Metro HR, it's mandatory. They kind of sent me a little note to give you a poke that says, and emphasize that you must attend one of the next sessions. The next sessions are Tuesday, August the 17th, Thursday, September the 23rd, and Tuesday, October the 26th. This training is in regards to sexual harassment prevention, diversity, and inclusion, and it is mandatory. So if you haven't already registered, I know I've sent out some reminders, just let me know and I can get you registered on that. We've had some, of course, I just mentioned that our community liaison person has moved on to a different city, and that process is it's happening right now. And so we haven't had as much outreach this month as we usually have. And so I'm looking forward to making certain that we get that person hired in the month of August. Fingers crossed. I attended District 1's community meeting on July the 22nd. A representative from Flock was there, as we said earlier, as well as North Precinct's community coordinator, which was Sergeant James Freeman. And so it was good to see who their community coordinator was. Dr. Valier, he's been preparing which he does every month, our performance monthly metrics that go to the mayor's office. And really it just breaks down what we're doing monthly in regards to, how many complaints we get, how many calls we get for service, and that's information that they've requested. And I've shared that with you all in the past. And then he also has been, they reached out to him from the Seattle Office of the Inspector General to provide technical assistance on traffic stops, which is really good to partner with other agencies who are doing this work. We've had 9 complaints since our last board meeting, and we may have had an extra one, so 9 or 10, and then we've had 6 non-complaint calls for service. And it may be a little bit more than that when we printed this information, so it could be a little off. But our investigative complaints are picking up, and so I want to talk a little bit about that as we move forward in this ED report. I wanted to let you know that I had a meeting with the OPA Director Moranti and Commander Lara, who's here today, in regards to the proposed resolution report. I sent the letter after we had this meeting and I sent that to you all, that that Chair Martinez completed. It was discussed in our last board meeting around the proposed resolution report that we sent over, and then the response. And the discussion centered around the process and the response. And I think we have an understanding now on how that should look going forward. There was some talk in regards to how once we send the proposed resolution report to the police department, what are they to do with it? And so, I explained to Director Moranti that once we finish our report and we send it over, we've done all the investigation that we're going to do, that it's up to them if they look through it and find that there's other outstanding issues that they want to address, that should lie in their lap, simply because they have to deal with the due process for the civil service. We don't. And so I think that there's an understanding now on how that process will look and how the response should be afterwards. And so once we get our legal advisor on board and get that person trained up, I think we should have another conversation regarding how this should look on their response. And so I thought the meeting went well. I think that we have an understanding, and, I don't have any more discussion around that. There's a body-worn camera update. It seems like 81% of the department, or maybe 100% now, or if you take the specialized units out, but 81% when I got this report, which was earlier it was on July the 22nd. So it said 1,084 of 1,332 active employees were equipped with body-worn cameras, and 705, is it 705 or 7? Okay, 705 of 730 vehicles are equipped with in-car cameras, which is 96% of the department. So I think that's really good. Who's 100% completed? All the precincts, the Youth Service Division, Property and Evidence Section, Field Training Officers, the Special Investigations Division, Countywide Traffic, the Training Division, the SRT Team, the K-9 Unit, Hazardous Device Unit, Emergency Contingency Section, Background and Recruiting, MDHA Task Force, and the Office of Community Outreach and Partnerships. And so they're also deploying cameras to specialized units. So that's going to take some time. And from my understanding, there's been no unresolved issues with equipment or storage capabilities. I wanted to move on to the growth of our department. So I received an email from the Metro Public Property, requested full-time employee growth projections. And what they did was they came around to the office to determine, and I think that this is really based out of the need for office space, or whether or not they were going to, some departments might go virtually, right? They might be remote workers. Because of course, rent is expensive and we're renting our space. And so as I began to look at that, and I know I sent you all the Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement's reports, the report on the state of the field and effective oversight practices, I would really say that you guys need to look into this. This is a phenomenal tool for us. But in that, there was some discussion about growth. And we have had this conversation in our executive, I've had this discussion with Chair Martinez, and I think in our executive committee meeting, about the growth of our department. And so as we think about the growth of the MNCO, I also think about Metro's adding a 9th precinct. That 9th precinct is going to probably have 140, maybe 140 new officers and employees. And so where we are now, based on, and Peter did a little bit, Dr. Valier did a little bit of data, pulled some information from this report. And what the report shows is that our department, for a department our size, based on the statistics and the data, that we should have between 4 to 6 investigators to be in line with what other investigative agencies in this field do. And so right now we only have 3. And so we are, if you think about a projection of 5 years, we would have 8 years of service, and we are we're not even half of where we should be. And so I gave some numbers, and I'll share those with you. I just think that we need to think about the growth. We get more complaints. We are seeing more complaints now than we've had in the past. And, I think that our investigators are kind of just swamped in that because we've been down one since last August. And so Ms. Simmons is coming in, at a deficit. And so the growth of our department, I projected 11 new positions over 5 years. And that would add, and I have the numbers for that. The numbers for that is, what did I do with that? The numbers would increase the overall capacity of the department. And so that would include having 2 extra paralegals, an assistant legal advisor, 5 new investigators, and 2 research assistants. And so that would give us the 21 people total. And of course, that's going to cost money. And so when we start talking about money, we'll have to talk to us collectively, talk about our budget next year. I would like to add at least 1 investigator next year, and then 2 in the second year, 3 in the third year of our 5-year projection, and then we'll skip the 4th year, and then the 5th year add an additional 1. And that would bring us up to speed in what it looks like is happening across this country. I also wanted to talk to you about our strategic plan. So I gave you that information. We've talked about it exclusively in our executive meeting. One of the problems, as we're projecting, we projected for 2 years, and we have at this point met the goals of this strategic plan. When we created this strategic plan, we did not add a whole lot of metrics in there because we were still kind of like finding our way through. But as I went over it just to see where we are, and we are in our 2nd year now of being fully staffed and up and running, it looks like we have met all of our own performance measures. There are a couple places that we need some strengthening, especially as it pertains to mediation. We have sent a few cases to mediation, and I don't think that any of them were accepted for some reason. Either the complainant, it was mostly the complainant, did not follow through on that. Did you want to say something about that?
We had 1 mediation case that was supposed to go. We had gotten agreement from the officer involved and the complainant. And as it was working through the process, the mediators from NCRC were trying to schedule a time, and the complainant decided they didn't want to go through with it anymore. So we had kind of a dry run on that to see how the process would work. It looks like it's going to work well. We've got another case that we've sent over about a week ago, and so NCRC is scheduling that to make that one happen. I feel pretty confident that one will happen.
Yeah, and if we can get to a point where, there's this trust that's built, that if we can get our complainants to participate in mediation, I think it would be helpful for the process. All we can do is continue to offer it in those certain categories of complaints. If in fact, mediation is available, like to try to talk to them about pursuing it, because I think it would be helpful in the process. And so we need to strengthen our mediation process, as well as in our community. We had a pandemic, and so we didn't get to go out as much, and we didn't really take advantage of the doing online outreach as we should have. And so I think that we missed, that actually was some missed opportunities to connect with the department, the police department, to meet with the community. And so we're going to go back when we get a new person to make certain that we aren't missing opportunities to engage our community members and see what their needs are. We need to have listening sessions. I mean, the good thing is we still can have Zoom meetings, but it's nothing like having those meetings in person. to talk to them about what they're experiencing. And so I'm looking forward to that. I will say that as it pertains to outreach, the police department has invited us, me and Mr. Clausey, to come and talk to the police department, the recruits, the next session. I think it's the 92nd session on August the 16th, Monday, August the 16th. I will be talking to the new recruits about the COB and the process of complaints and telling them about that. And then the next session would be in January. So I'm excited about that and that opportunity to collaborate with the police department on that. And I want to tell you in closing, really, about the Nashville Vision Zero. I'm a committee member, and I'm excited about it. I'm passionate about the traffic and biking and making this city walkable. And so if you want, you can go on and take this survey, which is visionzero.nashville.gov. It is a challenging goal, of course, and it's worth working towards because people deserve safe streets in Nashville. And we have had multiple traffic accidents that I think are preventable. And so, take the survey and we can talk about it. So I would like the board to, if you want, to give me some input on our next strategic planning meeting. We can plan a meeting and you guys can come and give us some information on where you would like to see or what some of your ideas are as we move forward and we project where we're going to be in 5 years. In 5 years, that would have this board up and standing for 8 years. And, we need to figure out what our goals are and what are we trying to do here. Because 8 years is it is actually moving towards, 10-year, we'll be at the 10-year mark before you know it. And so I'm looking forward to kind of collaborating with the board members in regards to, as you begin to roll off, if you have certain things or objectives that you want the board to consider, just let me know about that. And I know that you all received an update, the use of force policies, and I don't really want to get deep into it. I would prefer if you could, talk a little bit about what you handed out. That would be good. Thank you. Commander Lara, excuse me. Push the button. Okay.
There we go. Hear me okay? There we go. Good evening. So I handed out, our manual is online, and our manual has all of our policies. Right now, the manual is still being updated, so it's not updated online, the one that you would pull up. But what we do have is if you go on to the website and you go to where the manual is and you click, there's a section there where it has updates. So what I have given you is a copy of the updated manual use of force policy. That is the full use of force policy that we have. And apart from that, I believe Director Fitchard may have given you the roll call training that we have with some more updates to the policy that I just gave you. So I gave you the full policy, and then the roll call training is an update to that policy that we have. I don't know if that makes sense, but you should have two different stacks. Again, the first one is the policy that is the full use of force policy that we have, and then the roll call training that you received should be just another update and changes to the policy that I gave you initially. And if anybody has any questions on that.
You have any questions regarding the use of force update policy?
Your use of force policy and the community as a whole is not pleased with your use of force policy. They feel much as they've been shortchanged. They haven't been listened to. That's the reason why you got this oversight board. You can have a policy, but the main thing, you need to enforce it. We don't need anybody to slide under the rug. If right is right and wrong is wrong, and the people are very concerned if you got an officer that violated the law and your policy, then it should be implemented. Then action should be taken. And we don't need to slap them on the hand with the wrist. If you're wrong, you're wrong, and we need to deal with it.
One of the things I will say about the new policy of the roll call training, as I read it in the policy statement piece, there was some language in there that wasn't added in the last one. And so it says, respect for human life requires that police officers exhaust all other reasonable means before resorting to the use of firearms. And then only when an officer reasonably believes that such use of firearms is necessary to protect the officer or another from risk of serious physical harm or loss of life. And so I do appreciate that the word necessary was inserted, because I think that that is the area of contention, was, the use of force a necessary thing. And so I just wanted to point that out to you all.
And I just encourage you to review the actual policies. There's been a lot of changes that have been made, the chief has made, to go along with a lot of the policy recommendations from the Policing Policy Commission as well as others. So it's got it's very updated compared to what the old policy was. So I just encourage you to review it. And if you have any questions, please let me know, and we can get some answers for you.
Is there like a guide that we can use to see which changes were made?
Yes, sir. So there's the old policy, which is online. If you go online, you can actually pull up the department manual, and you can go into the section 11. It should be similar to what I gave you, and that has the old policy that we had. The first packet that you received from me, which has 30 plus, I think it's 15 pages back and front. That is the actual new policy. So it's been updated. So the policy and the manual that you find online, you can take that, and then you can take this new policy that I gave you, and you can compare those two, and you can see the changes. Apart from that, then you have another update that was given to you, which was the roll call training, and that has even more updates to the policy that I gave you. So you can really look at and see a lot of major changes from the department manual policy that you can get online, and then the packet that I gave you. You'll see a lot of significant changes on there. And you'll be able to just put it side by side, and you can actually go by the numbers on there of the section of the policy, and you can see the changes that were made from the old one to the new one.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Hayes?
Yeah, thank you for preparing this. I do see you did add a pretty good section, well, a more detailed section on de-escalation there. I don't think that was there before, but it was some time ago that we highlighted the use of force and de-escalation, and we were saying, we wanted to try to work with you on that. And I know Council Member Hall mentioned earlier about actually working with the people that are being affected. This board put out a really good policy advisory report on that particular subject. My question is, did they even look at that when they were trying to prepare this?
And I can't answer that. I can tell you that any policies or any type of recommendations most likely are going to be reviewed by our legal department and our legal advisor and those who are tasked with reviewing the policies. So I have no doubt that it's been reviewed. I can't tell you to what extent or if it's been used, because I don't know what the recommendations are.
But I look forward to looking at it in detail, because I know it was quite a few items in there that we recommended putting in. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
Director Richard, anything else?
No, I think that's it. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Commander. Appreciate your assistance. And so that actually just concludes my executive director's report, and we can, if you have any questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
How many people new people have you hired?
We've hired 2 people. We've hired a legal advisor, and we've hired 3, actually. I'm sorry. We've hired an investigator, a legal advisor, and a research assistant.
When do I get to meet them?
They're coming to the next board meeting, because they haven't started yet, so, except for the investigator. So everyone will be in the next meeting.
I like to meet them. I like to know a little something about them.
Okay, sure.
Mr. Hayes.
Okay, I do want to say I am glad that you're looking at, trying to increase the numbers, for the community oversight staff, because I think it's much needed. But one thing, it's just a comment. The reason that's needed is because anytime you have an organization, they have to manage their department. And coming from a manufacturing background, I'm looking at process control and different things like that. The police department has to be managed. So I'm saying things like forms not being completed and those, that's not this board's responsibility. That's the department that needs to do that. So they need to manage that. And the more efficient that they can get in managing their department, we will probably need less people. But right now, we really need a lot of people because we're lacking in that area. That's just a comment. Thank you.
And to piggyback on that, you know, I think about the fact that if they're increasing their personnel for policing, you know, and I don't want to project that the likelihood that complaints will increase, but the more than likely they will. And so if we're still operating with 3 people and there's an increase to the police department's personnel budget every year, we're going to always be behind the curve in being able to respond, get our complaints done in our 60-day mark. And so I think it's important as we are going forward that, you know, index budgeting is real. And like we need to think about even going next year, we need to start thinking about what that looks like, what the cost is, because before you know it, the new budget will be upon us.
Yeah, you're doing the right thing, increasing, definitely. But like I said, that's the other piece. You got to manage your department.
And so that concludes my portion.
Thank you, Director Fitzgerald. Any other questions there? If not, we can move to the next item on the agenda, which is the COB rules and bylaws update. And Mr. Goddard, I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you give us an update on that?
Yes, revised rules and bylaws were adopted by the committee. They went to Metro Legal for review, and that has happened. Is that right? Yes, they went to Alex.
I think so.
Okay. Some of it was adjusting the language more closely to the authorizing charter amendment. Some of it was aligning the defined terms. It's been surrounded. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has or other members of the committee can. The one thing we had the most discussion about before reaching consensus was what type of comments and how to allow comments to the board when a resolution report was created. And did the complainant have the right to address the board, pro or con, if they liked or didn't like the resolution report? And the same with respect to the officer. I speak for myself. I think reason for the consensus was we didn't like the idea that there was no opportunity to input from either the complainant or the officer after the draft report was out. We didn't like the idea of having either or both appear and speak in person at that time to create new arguments potentially or put the staff on the spot and all that, and recognized that a complainant may feel very uncomfortable speaking on that circumstance. And where we came down basically was, the language is in the draft, that each will be advised of and given a copy of, correct me if I'm wrong, Jill, a draft resolution report and advised of a time by which they may submit written comments if they like, which will be then read to the board by staff. Is that correct? Yes, that seemed to be the best place to address as well we could all of those concerns.
Are there any questions about any of the updates that were made in the bylaws or rules? If not, we can make a motion to accept all of the edits that were made, or we can go by them one by one. Depends on how comfortable or what everyone thinks about each of the recommendations.
Chair Martinez, one question. I do understand the concern for having someone speak, you know, whether it be intimidation or them just being uncomfortable. If they chose to speak, is there a manner in which they can do so?
Under these rules, they would not. To answer more completely, this board can always suspend the rules and allow something different in any specific circumstance by a 2/3 vote. Is that? It's in the rules. I should know this. I believe it's a supermajority. I believe it's a 2/3 vote.
Thank you.
And then this is just when we, as a board, are considering the proposed resolution report. The complainant can speak at any meeting at any other point, right?
Yeah, this is just about trying to manage how we were going to deal with the complainant and an officer at the same time in regards to a proposed resolution report.
I believe any complainant can speak generally about subjects at any time. I believe if a complainant has made a formal complaint that is working through the process with staff, it would be at least inappropriate, I believe, if not impermissible for that complainant to speak to the board about a matter that's in process with the staff, a specific complaint. That one exception.
Any other questions? Does anybody want to move to approve those items? Mr. Hayes.
I make a motion that we approve the COB rules and bylaws, the updated version.
Thank
And
you.
I'll second.
That motion.
Thank you. Any focused discussion there? Not. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. How long will it take for those to get updated and put on the website? Do you know?
I didn't hear you.
How long will it take for the rules and the bylaws?
Well, we
to-
have a clean version, so
Okay.
we can get it done as soon as it's, you guys, we've already approved it today, so then, yeah, we
Great.
can try to get it up there. It takes them a day or so, but we can try tomorrow.
All right. And I know at the beginning I mentioned that we were going to defer any action on the hiring and background recommendations response that we received until all the board members could be here and Dr. Verlier could be here as well, since he wrote the report. But I'm happy to hear any discussion or points that board members wanted to make in case they wanted to make them now. If there is none, we can defer it to the next meeting. Now I'll pass it back to you, Director Fitchard, for the MNPD and Vanderbilt Police Department MOU.
Okay, thank you. So over the last few weeks, I've received a couple complaints, I wouldn't say complaints, but inquiries regarding MNPD and Vanderbilt's relationship with, within the police department. And I think most of this was driven, and it's centered around a police shooting, I'm sorry, not a police shooting, a shooting that happened near Vanderbilt at a local eatery. And so the person that had been sending me messages regarding Vanderbilt police posed some really good questions that we hadn't really thought about in the past. And so I began to look at the Vanderbilt, MNPD and Vanderbilt Police Department's MOU, which I gave to you all. And in that, there's a section of that MOU that states that, that Vanderbilt falls under the direction and authority of the Metro Police Department. And because of that, there was some specific language regarding how they handle their complaints. And that process is not something that we had really talked about in the past. And so what I found out was, and as we thought through this process, two things. One of the things I thought about is what happens if there is a police shooting or some type of use of force that involves, the Vanderbilt Police Department. Would the board have the authority to appear and to process scenes like we do now? And so that's not clear. The second thing was, what happens if someone has a complaint and it happens outside of the campus, but it's still within, Vanderbilt's jurisdiction? Like, what's the process? And we don't have a process in place for that. And so looking forward, I thought, we need to, number one, figure out how this agreement affects us in the work that we do and the ability to investigate complaints. And then secondly, what a response would look like if, in fact, the Vanderbilt police were involved in a shooting or some type of use of force that rose to the occasion to have the COB called out. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention because the MOU has a statement in there that talks about that if there's a misconduct, that it would be handled by the Office of Professional Accountability. And so if the Office of Professional Accountability is handling complaints from Vanderbilt police, then I think that we should also have some type of mechanism in place that those complaints can also come to us. And so I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the board and then have a discussion about how you think we should remedy that.
we need to keep in mind that Vanderbilt is in metropolitan Davidson County area, and we just need to have a mutual understanding with them and the police department, you know, that they are in our jurisdiction as well, and we should have a role part in the investigation.
Yeah, and in their MOU, they have like very specific streets that they are, you know, responsible for, that are outside of the campus perimeter. And so because of that, I think that they fall under our purview. We just need to figure out how we're going to do that.
Any other questions about the MOU? Mr. Goddard? Yeah.
Yeah, we discussed this on the executive meeting, if I'm recalling correctly.
Mr. Goddard, your microphone is off. Sorry.
I'm sorry. What it was. If they are acting within that authority, they should be subject to oversight by this board. But I appreciate it's not clear and needs to be clarified. Just weighing in on it.
And I checked with Commander Lara, because that MOU was written in 2000. It was signed by our previous board member, Emmett Turner, and so there isn't a up-to-date one. That is the same one that they're using today, and so I think it is something that I am going to address with the leadership of the police department so that we can figure out how we can work through that. Yep.
So next steps, does the board need to do anything? Mr. Nguyen?
Yeah, I'd had a couple of things. I remember this very well when Chief Kirshner was the chief. It's my understanding, I don't know all the details of it, the state had a problem with certifying Vanderbilt as officers of a private university. As I remember, Chief Kirshner was one of the first chiefs, and then Chief Turner continued it, authorizing Vanderbilt to act as, certified officers. I've worked shootings on campus, murders, sex assaults, and we've had, over the years, had Vanderbilt officers go off campus and be involved in shootings. I'd be interested, too. I mean, I don't know why we couldn't invite the leadership of Vanderbilt Police to a meeting and talk to them about how they feel about the relationship with their agency and the COB and what that would look like, if it's possible. And by the way, let me just say this too. It's not a secret that historically, not only with TSU, but with Vanderbilt, a long history of Metro commanders leaving and retiring and going to work as chiefs and assistant chiefs and commanders at these agencies. I have a cousin who was a Goodlettsville chief and went on to become a captain at Vanderbilt. So there's been that sort of a relationship over the years, so they all know one another. It's not like they're unknown actors. So to have the commanders, I don't know who the chief is now at Vanderbilt, to have them to come in would be nice to find out how they feel about it.
I don't think we need to worry about how they feel about it. We need to make sure that they are operating within the guidelines of the law.
No, I don't disagree with you, Walter. I just would like to hear what their existing policy is and how they operate and how we operate as a board to govern their behavior.
Well, if they're not on board with the law, they need to get on board.
Sorry?
If they're not within the guidelines of the law, they need to get on board, period.
And I'm going to read into the record what it says. It says, to the extent and in the form as is requested by MMPD, any violation of any federal, state, or local law, or any significant violation of any MMPD or Vanderbilt University Police Department rule, regulation, or departmental policy by any VUPD member appointed to the position of special police officer will be reported immediately to MMPD's Office of Professional Accountability by VUPD's Director of Police and security. The MMPD may conduct in its sole discretion an investigation into any alleged misconduct, including the right to demand polygraph examinations, drug screening, or any other such action deemed necessary by MMPD investigative personnel.
Director Fitchard, I know we're looking at the Vanderbilt MOU today, but is this a widespread issue with higher institutions of learning in the state or in the city specifically? Is Vanderbilt's MOU the only one that we have an issue with at this point, or is this a widespread issue?
Well, Vanderbilt is the only one that we have an MOU with. They are special officers, special police officers commissioned by MMPD. The other schools have security, but they're not necessarily special police officers. So TSU wouldn't fall under this because, yeah, they're state at university, but also they're not special police officers who are commissioned or post-certified.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Mr. Goddard, did you, any other questions or comments about that MOU? So, Director Fitchard, you will initiate conversations with MNPD, and I believe you've already spoken to OPA about it.
I did. I spoke to Director Moranti yesterday, and she didn't have a whole lot, of comment on it because it's an old MOU, and they haven't, just to make certain that I'm making certain that I'm sharing this, they haven't had any complaints come through them that she can recall. And so I'm going to meet with, I'm going to get with Commander Lara, set up a time to speak with the leadership of MMPD in regards to that, and then reach out to Vanderbilt to see if we can, at least have a meeting in regards to how we're going to have some collaboration and make certain that if there's some cooperation that needs to happen, that it is happening with all three agencies.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, that concludes our part of the agenda. So if there's any public comment, I don't know if we've received any requests for public comment today.
We have one public comment, and that would be Mr. Davey Tucker. And you just push the button up there. Thank you.
This will not be long. That's what I really wanted to comment and hear you discuss, and also talk about my opinion and others. But I was listening to Councilman Hall around the LPR issue, and it seems to be that there is this thrust that people are hell-bent on doing LPRs, that it's been defeated twice in council, and it keeps having subsequent iterations, which caused me great concern about the over-policing of black and brown communities, particularly when it's used as a replacement for police. That becomes an asinine argument for me that we want to get LPRs for that. But even as I listen to you, as you continue, I'm always grateful for the work that you put in to actually fill this space that many folk in this city fought so hard for this, to still see that even as I listen, that there's this reluctance that continues to go on with the police department that does not desire to have oversight. Even after the people of Nashville overwhelmingly voted for oversight of the police department. I constantly hear you as you talk back and forth, as there's always this negotiation, which is not oversight. Even as I hear you talk about the office of OPA, I have no problem saying that trust cannot be built where it's been torn down before. You are our hope toward accountability and transparency as it relates to policing. And I just hope that you continue to push hard, even when you're being pushed back against, because this is what folk wanted for when over 60% of the registered voters in that election voted. it was clear we wanted oversight. If you recall, even the state tried to step in and take some of the power away, but this was what the people of Nashville wanted. And yes, I see superficial change, but I'm still concerned with the way policing is continued to be done. When you say community policing, you're really just saying policing the community. If you're going to say community policing, you must involve the community in coming up with the strategies that people who are genuinely interested in public safety have to say. And so as we continue to do that, we're always going to keep missing the mark. I also pastor in District 3, which is part of the area, and I have members that are in District 1. It's not a foregone conclusion with baby boomers that they want LPRs because they have grandsons and sons. So, and to show up here and not provide data and make assessments, to me, I found that to be a bit reckless. But I have great hope that this body would continue to push for real systemic change in policing that is necessary because people's lives depend on it. And as we continue on, I mean, the OPA with Ms. Morante, who's had a torrid history herself, continues to be the go-between. Those are issues that are always going to stand in the way of the community trusting the police department. And that's going to start with transparency and accountability to rebuild trust where trust has been torn down year after year, over and over and over. So I appreciate this time to talk. I will come back because the hiring recommendations are of great interest to me. I'm the chairperson of the Human Relations Commission, and those are some things that we're concerned with, that we have some things that we'd like to come alongside to possibly help in that. We did the mobile diversity tour that we do with every class. It's still 80% all white. And you just cannot tell me that there aren't people of color who cannot qualify to be police officers. But you can hire an Officer Glass who is in the middle of what was not an investigation, and gets hired, trained, put on policing, and then charged in a second-degree murder where the investigating detective gave him his card on the interview tape to say, if there's any question comes up, have them call me. Again, these are the practices that's still there. So I applaud you for your work, and I wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Tucker, if you have comments on the response, you can also send them to Director Fitchard, and she can definitely take those into account. So we all can know about those before we actually discuss them next month as well.
Thank you,
Mm-hmm. Any new business or announcements or any other public comments? I don't think there was. Sure.
I'd like to know, is it possible to have 3 routes to Smyrna and back from Smyrna to Nashville?
What type of route? Oh, I don't think we're qualified to answer that. We don't handle the public transportation part.
We don't have the answer for you, Ms. Millette, but I can try to help you and find someone to assist you with that answer.
I would appreciate it.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Any new business? Nope. If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.org.